okay, I've got my book here. This is my book, From Vietnam to Van Damme, pretty much my story. Talks about AFI and how I first got into screenwriting and Bloodsport. All of that stuff is covered in there.
Okay, USA. Okay, USA.
I had this aptitude for writing, so I started writing screenplays. And eventually, I wrote one called Firebase, which was a big Vietnam epic. It was basically like the movie Zulu. It was like Zulu in Vietnam. Small group of Americans on a hilltop, surrounded by VC and NVA, and big all-night battle. So I got an agent because of that script. And I've had interest in Firebase from really an amazing amount of people, including Walter Hill and Joel Silver. I actually had a meeting with them. I had a lunch with them. Walter Hill wanted to shoot this script. He wanted to turn this script into a film. And Paramount, which is where he had his deal, said to him basically, Walter, nobody wants to see a movie about Vietnam. This is about a year before Platoon, okay? So then Platoon comes out, and now everybody's making a Vietnam movie. And then Stallone got it, okay? Stallone got his hand, and Stallone loved it. Stallone wanted to make it, with himself starring in it, playing one of the major characters. So Platoon comes out, and now everybody's making a Vietnam movie. And then I ran into Walter Hill at a Directors Guild event shortly afterwards. And Walter says to me, you know, if I would have gotten Paramount to make that movie, that would have been us getting Oscars instead of Oliver Stone. Anyways, but that's what he said. And I believe it too. I think my screenplay is as good as Platoon, but it never got made. But it did get me a lot of it got me a lot of meetings, and I was able to advance quite a bit in the business. Not because of Bloodsport. Bloodsport, you know, people think that Bloodsport is what made my career, but no, Bloodsport didn't do shit for me. Okay, basically. Because of Firebase, because of Stallone reading Firebase, he got me hired to co-write Rambo 3 with him. That's what really stepped on the gas, okay? You know, Rambo 3, that really got my career into high gear. But Bloodsport really did nothing. In fact, you know, this was Rambo 3, Firebase, all of this was prior to Bloodsport.
Okay, guys. First, you can show the Black Dragon boys your invitation. Then, you gotta qualify and prove to them you can step onto the runway and not get killed. You got it? Mm-hmm. You got it? Mm-hmm.
I made a little movie called Firefight. This is a long story. Read the book, you get all the details. But I co-authored a play called Tracers, which was about the Vietnam veterans. And I co-authored it with about 8 other Vietnam vets, all of whom were actors. And we created this play, put the play on, and it became this big success, actually. It played in, Joseph Papp picked it up. It was in New York at the Public Theater. It was at the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. Gary Sinise directed it. This is prior to him playing Lieutenant Dan. And anyways, there was one scene that I wrote for the play that was a little too big to stage, to put on a small stage. So the director said, okay, forget it, I can't use this one. So I really liked that one little piece. It was, you know, like a 20-minute piece. And I decided, well, I'm gonna turn this into a screenplay and make a little movie out of it. So I wrote the screenplay and decided, okay, I'm gonna shoot this. And basically I put all the pieces together for it. Now, prior to this, I had met a guy named Frank Dukes. Okay. Now this is all tied in. Okay. I'll let you know how all the pieces fit together here. So Frank Dukes had an agent named Harold Moskowitz, and a friend of mine got my Firebase script to Harold Moskowitz. He was basically telling me, you need an agent to represent this script. This is a fantastic screenplay. He got it to Harold, and Harold liked the script and wanted to represent me. And Harold told me, I have another client who's also a Vietnam veteran, and he wrote a book, a novel, that takes place in Vietnam. Now, it's a really long novel. I forgot exactly, but it was at least 800 pages. I think it might have been 1,000 pages. It was a stack of pages like this, okay? And the book was called, or the novel was called The Last Rainbow, and it was written by a guy named Frank Dukes, who claimed to be a Vietnam veteran, and claimed that he based some of it on his own experiences. Turns out, skipping ahead a little bit, Frank was not a Vietnam veteran, had never been sent overseas. But anyways, I liked the book. It was actually well written. Frank's really not a bad writer. So I got in touch with him. I asked Harold for his phone number. I called him, we got together, and then I started learning more about Frank Dukes. He had a martial arts dojo in North Hollywood, and he was teaching ninjutsu. Now, this was the era when ninjas were very, very popular. Canon was making ninja movies, Enter the Ninja, Return of the Ninja, all this kind of stuff. So Frank, turns out, really didn't know jack about ninjutsu except what he read in some books. But he claimed that when he was a teenager, a ninja master, wizened old Japanese, took him to Japan to train him how to be a ninja. And he had all this ninjutsu training in Japan under the tutelage of Senzo Tanaka. That was the name of his teacher. Turns out Senzo Tanaka is the same name that Ian Fleming used in a book called You Only Live Twice, a James Bond book. And Senzo Tanaka was a ninja master in You Only Live Twice. So Frank pretty much borrowed that and said that, yeah, well, Senzo Tanaka was my guy. He was my teacher. So beyond all that, Frank said that he was a martial artist. He was teaching people these classes. I sat in on a few classes and watched. And he said, and he had literature, like a brochure in front of his school that people could pick up. And it said that he was the first non-Oriental to win a contest, a tournament called the Kumite. He started explaining more about the Kumite to me. I asked him about this, and yeah, it's held every 5 years. I was the first non-Asian invited to it, and I actually won the Kumite. There were all these different fighters from all around the world, and I fought most of them. And at the end of the day, I won the final match, and I was given a sword. I was given a trophy. And I'm the champion of the 1975 Kumite. Now, that's a pretty fantastic tale to hear from somebody, but I didn't really know much about martial arts at the time. I knew about the military, but I didn't know much about martial arts. Oh, and Frank he actually had been in the Marine Corps. He built up this legend about himself being a war hero, winning all these medals. He had photographs. You can find them easily on the internet. There's a photograph of him with all kinds of medals all over his chest in a Marine Corps uniform. Turned out he was in the Marine Corps Reserves. He was not part of the Fleet Marine Force. He was a real Marine in a way. He was in the reserves. But basically, he was a weekend warrior. He was never sent overseas. He was never in Vietnam. He was never anywhere. The Marine Corps never sent him anywhere. But he claimed that they did. And as part of the Kumite story, he said that he actually went AWOL so that he could participate in this Kumite. Now, as fantastic as all of this sounds, he also had an article from Black Belt magazine, a full article about himself and the Kumite. And it's called Kumite, A Learning Experience. I have copies of it. People have seen it on the internet. And basically, he convinced the editor of Black Belt magazine, John Stewart, that he participated in this Kumite and won the Kumite, and had all these details about how the Kumite was structured and somehow, where some of the different fighters came from. So this is Black Belt Magazine. This is a big article in Black Belt Magazine. Now, I didn't know much about martial arts at all. I'd never studied martial arts. I had not even seen Enter the Dragon. So the story was not derived from Enter the Dragon at all. When all of this was occurring, when I met Frank, when I read the article, there was no internet. There was no email. There was no Google. Okay, so you couldn't look this stuff up. And on top of that, Frank said it was all secret. It was secret. So, even if you've got the internet, you're not going to find information because everybody who participates in the Kumite is sworn to secrecy. And he was saying, I'm the first one that they've allowed to talk about it because they wanted to publicize it a little bit. And Frank is just great at making shit up, all right? If you corner him with some information, basically you've got the goods on him, you get him in a corner, he'll talk his way out of it. He's really good at that. He's really good at making up new stuff. He was also telling people back then that he had been awarded the Medal of Honor for valor in combat. All right, so we shot our little movie. I got Frank involved with my little production, Firefight. Actually, he plays one of the lead roles in it. At the time, he thought he was movie star material, and he wanted to be on camera. He actually put a little bit of money into the film. I got money from various people. He wanted to be. He thought he looked like. He thought he had a Tom Selleck vibe about him at the time. He kind of did, but he's no actor. He's no movie star. And I pretty much proved it with Firefight. Okay, he's okay. I did make him pretty much the lead character, but he doesn't really carry the little movie. So anyways, we shot Firefight at Camp Pendleton. Oh, getting back to the Medal of Honor story. So Frank was telling people that he won the Medal of Honor. And my producer and I were at Camp Pendleton. We're talking to some of the Marines. They gave us permission to shoot at Camp Pendleton, mostly because I was a former Marine and I talked them into it somehow. And they even gave us a helicopter. They gave us a big-ass CH-46 helicopter for about 2 hours, and I got this thing to fly around and be part of the story. But my producer had heard, Frank had been telling everybody that he ever met, I have a Medal of Honor. And so he mentioned that to these Marines. He figured they'd be impressed by the fact that we were working with a Medal of Honor recipient. And okay, these are guys that are in the Marine Corps. Again, this is before the internet, but they had their own books, their own databases. And so they go and they look it up. And the next day they tell us, hey, we looked up the name of this guy, Frank Dukes, and the Department of Defense has no record of him being awarded the Medal of Honor. So we confront Frank with this. Hey, the Marines said that they didn't find any record of you. And he quickly does a little tap dance and says, well, the reason is because I got a secret Medal of Honor. Because the missions that I was on were so secret. There were these, these black ops missions that the government can't talk about. So no, you're not going to find it on record because they hid the records. In fact, the records of that's why you don't see. You look at the records from the Marine Corps, and they'll tell you I was only in the reserves and I never went overseas. But that's all of that's been redacted. They basically had to cover up the fact that I was doing all these secret missions. And he said he was actually in the CIA. He'd been recruited into the CIA. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, listening to all this stuff? And he still maintains these stories to this very day. Now that people have been able to check them and double check them, and basically it comes back that, no, Frank, you didn't do any of this stuff. He even wrote a book about himself called The Secret Man. And this book was actually, it was published by, it was Reagan Books, Judith Regan was the publisher. And it was actually on the stands for about a week, okay? Now, I happened to get my hands on the book because I was at an airport getting ready to fly somewhere, and I go in their little airport bookstore, and there's The Secret Man. I'm like, well, what the hell? There's Frank's book. I pick up a copy. Within a couple of weeks, you could not find a copy anymore because, And there was no Amazon back then. You couldn't order it online. Basically, if you didn't get it in a bookstore, you couldn't get it. Judith Regan heard from many people whose names were mentioned in the book that no, they never worked with Frank Dukes. They never heard of Frank Dukes. He was mentioning people like Norman Schwarzkopf, and basically, and Judith Regan had the wherewithal to ask people like that, or she didn't have to ask them because they were getting in touch with her and saying, "Who's this Frank Dukes character? He's writing about me. I never met him in my life." And no, and even the CIA, they make it a habit to neither confirm nor deny. We're not going to deny it. We're not going to confirm it because we don't want to talk about it at all. All right, so you'll have to find that on your own. Well, the CIA even got in touch with Judith Regan, and they told her, "We never had any contact with this guy." Look, generally, we're kind of breaking protocol here because we usually don't debunk stories that people tell about us. But this one is so outrageous. It's just so out there. And it kind of embarrasses us if people think this is how the CIA operates. And then he's got stories in The Secret Man about missions that like one-man missions that he goes on to Nicaragua, to Iran. He's blowing up ammo depots. He's blowing up fuel depots. It's all in the book. It's not impossible to get the book nowadays, but basically, Regan Books pulled it from the shelves about a week after it came out because they were firmly convinced that they got hoodwinked, and they did. They got hoodwinked big time. So they got hoodwinked. I got hoodwinked. Cannon Films got hoodwinked. We all got hoodwinked by Frank, but at the end of the day, we made a pretty damn good movie. So I was editing our little movie Firefight at a very low budget editing facility, post-production facility in Hollywood. And next door to me, there was another movie being edited. It was a porno movie that was produced by Mark DeSalle. Now, I was talking to the editor, and I believe, I had been hired to write Rambo 3 at the time. So I believe I might have mentioned this to him. Anyways, so he told Mark, "Hey, the guy who's writing Rambo 3 is working in the next editing bay." And Mark said, "I want to talk to the guy. I want to take him out to lunch because I've got an idea for a screenplay, and I want to hire a writer to write it." So I ended up having lunch with Mark DeSalle. And Mark had an interesting theory, which is very true, actually, which is that the subjects of movies, it's a cyclical industry. They'll make science fiction movies for a while, and then they don't make science fiction movies. They'll make cowboy movies for a while, and then they stop making cowboy movies. And one thing that I haven't seen for a long time is a martial arts movie, is a karate movie. So the cycle basically is going to repeat itself sooner or later. And I want to kickstart that cycle. I've got an idea for a movie called Kickboxer. And so he pitched Kickboxer to me. And his version of Kickboxer at the time was different than the way that the movie turned out because rather than the villain, Tong Po, killing the brother of the Van Damme character, he kills his mother. Basically, Kurt defeats Tong Po in a match somewhere here in LA. And then Kurt goes home and he lives with his mom. And Tong Po sneaks into the house at night and tries to kick Kurt in the face, and Kurt ducks, but Tong Po, his foot connects with his mother, and he kills Kurt's mother. So basically that was, that's the inciting incident that gets the story going. Like, "Oh, you killed my mother. I'm gonna come to Thailand and kill you." Well, I thought that was a bit silly. But what if instead of the mother, he's got a brother who's also a martial artist, and Tong Po kills or injures Kurt's brother, and then Kurt decides to go to Thailand to seek revenge. So that became Kickboxer later on. But I didn't like the Kickboxer idea at all, you know, the whole thing about the mother being killed. And so I say, okay, Mark, I got a better idea for you, all right? It's called Bloodsport. Well, Bloodsport, wow. As soon as he heard that title, he's all ears. People are all ears. People love that title. And Frank is the one who came up with that title, but not as a movie title. We're driving in my car, actually not far from here, right by Universal. And he's telling me these Kumite stories. He tells me, well, it got very bloody, you know, because there was no holds barred. People were dying. So our nickname for it was Bloodsport. And it was like I heard a choir of angels singing, like Bloodsport. Wow, is that a great title for a movie? Okay, so not only is that a great title, but all these stories that you've told me about the Kumite and the article in Black Belt Magazine about this tournament, that sounds like a movie to me. That sounds like a martial arts movie to me. We didn't write anything. Basically, we were thinking we should write this down. We should write the script, Bloodsport. We never did. We didn't write anything. And then I met Mark and I pitched the idea to him, Bloodsport. And I told him, it's based on this real guy named Frank Dukes, who actually doesn't live far from here. We should set up another meeting so you can meet Frank Dukes and hear all about this directly from him. So we did that. We had a meeting with Frank and Mark. And Mark was getting more and more jazzed about this idea. And now, not only is it a true story, ostensibly it's a true story. You know, how do we check up on it? Well, it's in Black Belt Magazine. What else? What more do you need? As Black Belt Magazine says it's true, what more do you need at the time? So Mark ends up hiring me to write a screenplay, to write Bloodsport. And he pays Frank, he had a contract with Frank also, for the rights to his true life story. Okay, so two contracts. I have copies of both of them. And that's basically how we got the project in gear.
It is a very special sword. You must earn it.
I wasn't going to steal it.
You didn't flinch. You have fighting spirit.
Mark liked the screenplay, and he had some ideas of how to get it set up. Mark, he had some wherewithal. He had some money, not enough to actually make a feature film, but he had access to money. But he knew he was going to need a lot more to make the film. So he knew a guy named Lou Horowitz, and Lou was a guy who would find money to make films, or he'd find what was called the gap financing. Like if somebody's got X amount of dollars, they need more, that's the gap. Lou would find the gap that you needed so that you could make the entire movie. Or there'd be a gap, somebody would have the movie in the can, they didn't have enough to finish it, to do the post-production. Lou would close that gap. He'd find them the money they needed to complete the film. And Lou was good friends with Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus at Cannon Films. So he got involved, and he took the project to Menachem and Yoram at Cannon. And Cannon was making martial arts movies at the time. So basically, the cycle had begun already for making martial arts movies. Cannon was making Enter the Ninja and other ninja movies, Avenging Force. They were making a bunch of low-budget action movies, ninja movies, martial arts movies. And they bought it. They said, yeah, we want to make this movie. So Mark ended up selling the rights to Cannon. So now it became a Cannon production. And then there were a number of steps that we had to go through. First of all, Mark needed to get a director. There was no director at the time. We had a script, no director. We had a script and we had financing. Basically, we had a studio, Cannon, that was willing to put up the money. It was not a lot. It was like just a little over $1 million to make the movie. which is like a typical Canon budget at the time. What I found out, I didn't know it at the time, but the first guy Mark wanted to go after was Robert Klaus. And I believe he actually got in touch with Robert Klaus. Somehow it didn't work out, but Robert Klaus was choice number one for director. Then, you read about it in my book, because the author of the book, Corey Dana, also was interviewing Sam Furstenberg. So he knew he had Sam's phone number, and Sam was like their in-house ninja movie director. So they did mention Sam. I don't know what, I think Sam talks about it a little bit in my book, but Sam ended up not directing it because I think he was doing too many other ninja movies. And they ended up getting Newt Arnold. Now, Newt was a first assistant director. He'd been first assistant director on a lot of huge films. He was the first assistant director on Blade Runner, for example. And Newt had fixed up, Canon got into trouble with one of their little movies. They had a director that couldn't quite handle the production. And somebody recommended Newt Arnold to him. Newt came in. Newt completely saved the movie. Didn't get credit for directing it, but basically Newt ghost directed this little movie. So Menachem told him, okay, if you ghost direct this movie for us, I'm going to give you a movie to direct on your own. And that movie ended up being Bloodsport. Okay, so we got Bloodsport for you. Newt, by the way, did a fantastic job on Bloodsport. I don't know if any of the in-house Canon guys would have done. The thing is, with Newt was not just trying to make a typical Canon ninja movie. He tried to make it something special. And Mark did too. Mark actually wanted to do something that wasn't, that didn't just fall in line with the other Canon low-budget ninja movies. They wanted to do something special. Mark is the one who brought in the music, and the music is very crucial for it. That's one of the elements that makes Bloodsport work so well, is the music score and the songs. They work really great. So Mark brought that in. I'm not sure. Now, I never had a chance to meet Newt Arnold. He was brought on. I didn't go to Hong Kong either, because basically the writer is the low end of the totem pole. You don't bring the writer with you. So like I didn't get to go to the Rambo 3 shoot because Stallone figured out, well, what do I need you for? I'm the co-writer. So I didn't go. I was not on the set. But Newt did a great job. Frank got himself hired to be the fight choreographer, although there were a number of fight choreographers, local ones also, from Hong Kong. The way that the movie ended up taking place in Hong Kong, it was not written to take place in Hong Kong, but Canon found a great production services deal with a guy named Charlie Wang. And Charlie had a company called Salon Films over in Hong Kong. And Charlie offered them a great deal for, cameras, lenses, lighting equipment, all of that. But you got to shoot in Hong Kong. So basically, we reworked the script for Hong Kong. I can't remember if we had it taking place we didn't have a real geographic location for it. It was just the Kumite, the secret location, and Frank said that it took place in Bermuda, although people in Bermuda, government officials there have said, we never heard of this tournament, it never took place. But we reworked the script for Hong Kong, which actually worked out great, because Charlie gave us this great production deal. Now Charlie actually ended up, by the way, in the scene where Jackson is in the hospital, that's Charlie Wang, who's playing the doctor. So Charlie's in the movie. And then Charlie went on to do, we did Double Impact in Hong Kong a few years later, and Salon Films was the co-producer of that. They did production services also.
What? Think you can give me some competition?
Sure, I'll try.
That's what I like to hear. Kid who isn't afraid to lose. No, I got it. I want to take his money. You ready?
Yeah.
Another thing we were lacking at first, because we did not write the screenplay for any particular actor. In fact, we had no actor in mind when I wrote the screenplay. It was basically this character named Frank Dukes, who was based on this guy Frank Dukes that I actually knew. And once the pieces started falling in place to actually put the movie together, then we needed an actor. And there were a few choices that we talked about at the time. Chuck Norris's name was mentioned because he was pretty much Cannon's big martial arts star at the time. But Chuck was way too old. Chuck was in his 40s at least, and the character, for the story to work, the character had to be in his 20s. So Chuck was out. Michael Dudikoff was mentioned. Menachem Golan just loved Michael Dudikoff, thought he was going to be a big movie star. Michael was like an okay actor. He had a good look. He was in all those ninja movies, but he was no martial artist. He couldn't do any of those moves himself. And they had Sho Kosugi actually doing all the ninja stuff, but dressed in a ninja outfit, so you couldn't see his face. But basically, that was all supposed to be Michael Dudikoff, but none of it was. And they might have a shot every so often. I think they had a few shots with him without the ninja mask on, but the rest of the ninja outfit on. But Michael Dudikoff did none of those stunts. But for Bloodsport, you couldn't get away with that. You had to have somebody who was a martial artist. And there were a few others that were mentioned. I believe the name Sasha Mitchell was mentioned. There were a few, but we did not have the ideal guy yet. And then the movie No Retreat, No Surrender opened. And it was playing in LA, it was playing in the US. And Jean-Claude Van Damme played the villain in that. He was the baddie. There was a character named Kurt in that one, and his ultimate fight is with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Mark told us about Jean-Claude. In his own inimitable style, he said, there's this guy I want you to look at. His name's Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's in No Retreat, No Surrender. So Frank and I went to see Jean-Claude Van Damme in No Retreat, No Surrender, and we were blown away. We thought he was great. So we told Mark, yeah, this guy's perfect. And then Jean-Claude at the time had also had like a chance encounter with Menachem Golan at the Cannes Film Festival maybe a year earlier. Gave him his business card. Hey, my name's Van Damme. I'm going to be a big movie star one of these days. He used to say that to everybody, and he was right. And so Menachem didn't really remember him. But Jean-Claude is driving down La Cienega Boulevard with Michel Kesey one night, and he sees Menachem getting out of a car and going into a restaurant. And he says, Michel, that's Menachem Golan. Look, do a U-turn real quick. Let's go back and see him. So Jean-Claude goes up to Menachem. Hey, Menachem, remember me, Jean-Claude Van Damme? Menachem didn't remember him, of course. And Jean-Claude threw a fake kick at his face. He used to do that to everybody. He'd throw a kick at you and miss your nose by an inch or 2 inches. And he did that to Menachem. And Menachem had his assistant with him, a woman named Karen. And from what they told me, after Jean-Claude threw the kick, he said, Karen, give him Bloodsport, okay? And you, Van Damme, you come see me tomorrow in my office, okay? So he went to see Menachem at the Cannon Film offices on San Vicente. And apparently they made a deal. Apparently, here's the perfect guy. He's an unknown. He's not going to cost a lot of money. He can do all the martial arts stuff for real. He's got a good look. Can he act? Doesn't matter. It's a martial arts movie. So they ended up making a 3-picture deal with Jean-Claude. And then Mark calls us and says, "Hey, we got the guy. We got the Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's going to play Frank Dukes."
That will make you Frank Dux.
No. It's Dukes.
Gotcha. Like put up your dukes, right? Okay, so here's the deal. This is the biggest comedy ever. We got fighters from all over.
Mark was a fan of Enter the Dragon, So he tells us, hey, for Chong Li, guess who we're going to get? We're going to get Bolo Yeung to play Chong Li. And we're, hey, we're ecstatic. Oh yeah, Bolo, the guy who fights Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. So now it's starting to come together. So then I don't know the story of when Menachem told Newt Arnold they wanted him to direct the movie. So now we had a director, we had a location, Hong Kong. We had a movie star, we had our star. It wasn't a movie star at the time, but we had a guy who could do the martial arts and play the role. And so it pretty much started coming together.
You two are here for the Kumite, aren't you?
Kumite? What is Kumite?
Look, guys, I know there's a secret full-contact event being held in Hong Kong in the next few days.
Yes, Hong Kong is an exciting city.
Bloodsport had an unusual structure to it. And this is a structure that I came up with. And basically the structure was, it starts when the fighters are arriving for the Kumite, then we see the Kumite, and then the movie ends when the Frank Dukes character is getting on the plane and going home. It all takes place at the tournament. There's a few digressions to show how Frank got there and how he got trained and all of that. But basically, there really wasn't a movie quite like this before. There wasn't like a boxing movie or martial arts movie like this, where it's all about the tournament. It's just a tournament movie. There were many of them afterwards. This basically led to Blood Fist and Blood Match and all of that. So there were a lot of imitations. But this was the first one that just said, forget about all this other stuff. All we want to see is the tournament and the fights. Now, there were a few other producers that read the script, and I think Dino De Laurentiis, I'm pretty sure, I'm just thinking it's his voice. Dino is the one who, Dino read it, and he said, this script, all it is fight, 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 and more fight, 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 and more fight, fight, fight. That's the whole movie. And I said, yeah, that's it. You got it, okay? That is the movie. And that's what audiences wanted to see. So it was a formula that worked really well, but Carl Kress, I don't think, quite understood that formula because it was kind of new. And sure, there were boxing movies before. As far as martial arts movies, there was no martial arts tournament movie quite like this that I know of anyways. And Enter the Dragon certainly wasn't a martial arts tournament movie. The tournament was just a small part of it. That's the excuse that they used to get into the island, was to enter the tournament. So the first cut was quite horrendous. It had none of the music. It had none of the songs. It was just no fun at all. And Menachem thought it was, look, Menachem was right. It was a terrible movie. He also thought Van Damme's this guy doesn't have it. This guy's never going to be a movie star. Once the movie was recut, we figured, okay, this movie's going to do really well. And Menachem was not going to release Bloodsport in theaters. And he told me this in the meeting. He said, I'm going straight to video with it. Their big movie that year, Cannon's big movie, was Missing in Action 3, okay? It's going to be as big as the Rambo films, okay? And they even titled it kind of like the Rambo films instead of, rather than Rambo First Blood Part 2, this is Braddock was the name of the Chuck Norris character. It was Braddock Missing in Action 3. Now, this is going to be huge. And I told Menachem to his face, he was not happy about this. I said, Menachem, if you release Bloodsport in theaters, it's going to make more money than Missing in Action 3. He said, you're dreaming, my friend. Okay, so here we are 40 years later, and yeah, is anybody talking about Missing in Action 3? No, we're talking about Bloodsport. And Bloodsport did make more money than Missing in Action 3, a lot more money.
Son of the bitch! Is that good enough, guys?
We honor your invitation.
No shit, you honor his invitation.
So he was not going to go theatrical with Bloodsport. But we had an ally in France named Sami Hadida. Sami Hadida had a company in France called Metropolitan Film Export, and they had released No Retreat, No Surrender under the title Karate Tiger, and it did extremely well in France. So Sammy gets wind of this, so he knows that there's another Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, and Sammy contacts Menachem and says, look, if you don't want to release that movie Bloodsport theatrically, I'll buy it from you, okay? I'll buy it, I'll release it theatrically, in France for sure, maybe in the US, but I'll buy it from you. So now Menachem's thinking like, okay, if Sami Hadida wants to buy the movie, maybe I'm making a mistake here. What they ended up doing is they test marketed the film. They opened it on the west coast of the US. So it was California, Oregon, and Washington. And it did extremely well, much better than anybody expected. And that pretty much led to their decision to open it in the rest of the country, theatrically, on, I don't know, X number of screens, but however many screens can and could open a movie on. And it did really, really well.
Very good. But brick, not hit back.
We had like a little mini premiere of Bloodsport on Hollywood Boulevard. And basically, people didn't really know who the hell Van Damme was. They didn't know much about Bloodsport, but they advertised in the newspapers, and we had a big crowd show up. I think they were just intrigued by the title itself, Bloodsport. Where the world's greatest fighters meet in a battle to the death or something like that, whatever it said on the poster. We had a big crowd there. I went there with Sam Raimi. I had introduced Sam Raimi to Jean-Claude earlier also, and Sam immediately thought, this guy's really got it, this guy's really going to be a movie star. And Sam actually ended up making a few movies with him. He didn't direct them, but Hard Target, Sam produced, and Time Cop. Yeah, Sam came to that screening with me. He was sitting. He was really intrigued by Frank Dukes at the time, and so I believe Sam was sitting right in between me and Frank Dukes, watching the first showing of Bloodsport. And then we all went over to my apartment, and we had a big party, and we were talking about how great the movie's going to do. And it turned out it really exceeded anybody's expectations.
What is this air of mystery? I'm just trying to find out what it's all about. Why are you fighting in it?
It's personal.
You want to prove your manhood to the world?
The committee is for the fighters, not for the people who read newspapers.
It's a fun movie. Bloodsport's a fun movie. Those fights they're fun to watch. They're not all that brutal by today's standards, but they're clever. They're fun. There's a lot about those fights that just keeps you watching it over and over again. Oh, apparently, look, Donald Trump, big fan of Bloodsport. Okay, some journalist is doing an interview with him one time, and goes on his private jet with him, and he had another movie to watch on VHS. I think it was a movie called Michael with John Travolta. I watch a few minutes, and then Trump says, "Okay, turn this off. Let's get Bloodsport. Let's watch Bloodsport again." And with Bloodsport, he wouldn't watch the entire movie because he'd seen it enough times. He would let's just go to the good parts. Let's just go to the fights. All right, let's cut out the blah blah and just go to the action stuff. So that's pretty funny because he actually put it on a. When you talk to Trump about his favorite movies, well, Bloodsport was right up there with Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane. So I must say, I thought the man had good taste in movies at least, and he liked The Godfather too. From Vietnam to Van Damme. Lots of photos in it also, but they're not, they're in black and white. If you go on Facebook, look me up on Facebook, I got all these same photos in color.
And you guys are all on. There's a Bloodsport group on Facebook as well, right? With everyone.
There's a few Bloodsport pages on Facebook. There's Bloodsport Behind the Scenes, and that's the one that David Worth is one of the administrators of that one. And then there's one called Bloodsport, the greatest martial arts movie ever made. There's a few more, but it's amazing just how many Bloodsport fans are out there. The fact that I'm talking about it 40 years later is quite astounding to me. I would not have imagined it at the time. I would not have imagined just how much of an impact that movie has had upon the world.